And our final speaker tonight is Father Donald Godfrey. Donald is a Jesuit priest and is Executive Director of University Ministry at the University of California in San Francisco. He has a doctorate of ministry and is the author of Gays and Greys, the story of the gay community at Most Holy Redeemer Catholic Parish, San Francisco. Father Donald will share this experience and his experience of ministry to the GLBT Catholic community. Ladies and gentlemen, Father Donald Godfrey.
Thank you, Paul. It's a great honor to be here again. I was connected with Acceptance 9 years ago when I was on a spiritual sabbatical here in Sydney in Australia, and it's wonderful to be reconnected. And it's also an honor to be part of a forum like this with such wonderful play and such wonderful speakers. Most of the lay people in Australia seem very well educated because quite a few of the points that were raised already are points in my talk, so I'll change my talk a little bit as I go along. But I'd just like to last month, the Australian bishops said sorry to Catholics for the hurt caused by the church. And they made a beautiful statement. They said, sometimes people are hurt by family members. We ask your forgiveness if you've been hurt in some way through the church. Well, as a Jesuit, I follow St. Ignatius of Loyola. Jesus, obviously, but also... and St. Ignatius of Loyola said that love shows itself more in actions than in words. And it's not really much good issuing lovely statements, even if they were, I'm sure it was sincere, but you have to back them up with actions. And actions which for Catholics who happen to be GLBTQ, if I gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or queer, listening to David, if you don't mind me saying gay and lesbian and including everybody of all that sexual orientation, just as David said. But if we don't include the creation of safe places within our church where gay and lesbian spirituality and gay and lesbian people can celebrate their spirituality and who they are, then you're not really putting teeth into those words. And certainly the intervention by World Youth Day to prevent the Marges hosting Acceptance's forum on how young Catholics with different sexualities can live their Christian commitment undermines those words. The webpage of the Marges website said, unfortunately, we've been instructed to cancel this forum. It was as simple as that. Well, you can't really cancel a forum, can you? In fact, you can't really stop this conversation because the conversation is happening and is so important and valuable. And thank God for that. And in fact, the interesting and exciting thing is, if this had been at Riverview, there probably would have been a very small number of people. In fact, we've got a packed auditorium here because of the interest that was generated because of that decision. It was an unfortunate decision, even though it's led to some good because it's increased the conversation, because it's precisely a forum and a conversation like that that is at the heart of the gospel of Jesus. And if we as a church want to be followers of him, then we want to be like him. And the theme of this World Youth Day, and I'm a pilgrim, so I've got my pass here, is receiving the power of the Holy Spirit. And Pope Benedict's letter, which is in what we all got as pilgrims, and this is his letter, he said, he invites us to know the Spirit, to establish a relationship with him and welcome him as the guide of our souls, because he alone can open us up to faith and allow us to live it each day to the full. He, she. But increasing numbers of young gay and lesbian Catholics are following the Pope and listening to the Spirit and choosing to openly identify in the truth of who they are before God, loved exactly as they are. It's over 20 years ago. I think the church is kind of conflicted about this. It doesn't quite know what to do. Over 20 years ago, the American bishops said that gay people should have an active role in the Christian community. This means they have a right to be welcomed. They have a right to respect, friendship, and justice. Again, beautiful words. And certainly, I've come in the person of Jesus to know and discover a God who warmly welcomes all of us who happen to be gay and lesbian. And most especially, at the table, his table, in the Holy Eucharist. Following the example of Jesus, our table fellowship as a church must find a way to welcome young gay and lesbian Catholics without prejudice, but with acceptance and inclusion. And this is one of the reasons, I suppose, we haven't yet put up sexual orientation detectors at the doors of our churches. I don't think it's going to happen, even after this decision last month. And I don't think they're going to put them up at Randwick Racecourse at the weekend. It'd be very interesting to see how many of our key church members might be missing if there were such a sexual orientation. Paul kindly mentioned my book and the research that I've done and my work in ministry, and I don't want us to go on too long, so I'm going to cut it very short. But the story of my book is a story of a small parish community, the community of Most Holy Redeemer Parish in San Francisco. It's a place where I was the deacon. It's a place I've helped out. It's not my primary work. It's a place I help out. But it moved from being a place of hostility when the Castro in San Francisco was becoming the gay neighborhood of the city. That was the center of resistance. They called the gay people the invaders. They were taking over the life and soul of the parish, and the parish put up the fortress gates, and that was it. But that parish, it's a long story, I'm not going to go into it, moved from being a place of hostility to being a place of welcome and inclusion. And it was actually the combination of gay and straight together, gays and greys, because the greys were the older community who are increasingly also isolated in Californian society at the time. But I think something interesting happened because the two were able to come together. If it had just been the gays or had just been the greys, it wouldn't have been quite as creative or exciting. The parish priest who was, I just say one sentence about him, I had a paragraph or two, but Father Tony McGuire was the key figure and a key leader in that community who helped transform it. And he was he said he went in a little naive, but with the right attitude and a good heart. And when he was retiring, he said, you know, I really was naive when I came here because I thought that Hail Holy Queen was a good opening hymn. And is actually captured on the local TV station and put on the evening news that night. My hope is that a parish like that, and I know there are stories like that here because we hear the beautiful stories of parishes that do welcome people. I think the church is changing, and I think the church cannot stop this change because I believe it is a movement of the Spirit. More and more parishes are like Most Holy Redeemer. They're not all going to be 90% gay like that parish, but more and more parishes are finding a place in their hearts and at the table for those who happen to be gay and lesbian. And I think more and more that's true of the people of God in general. It's true of clergy. It's true of bishops. Sometimes they're too frightened to speak out. But I think it's true there too. But I think there's a tipping point, and I don't know when we'll reach it. There was that book recently written about a tipping point. There's a tipping point, at least in some countries in the world. World Youth Day has made me very aware of how different cultures deal with this issue so differently. But at least in certain parts of the world, I think we're reaching that place. And I hope that this book and this story can be a metaphor for what the whole church can one day become. There's a great document of Second Vatican Council, Gaudium et Spes, which urges that we need a conversation on issues of common concern as proof of the church's solidarity with all the human family. That teaching, which is the highest teaching that the church can possibly issue, higher than any papal encyclical, if we're to follow that, we have to listen to the experience of gay Catholics, young men like Dan Smith. We have to listen to their families like Les and Sue. We have to listen to sociologists, psychologists, and others in a true, to use this word again, discernment that hears, distinguishes, and interprets all this in the light of God's word and voice. We don't know exactly where that journey is going to take us. We don't know exactly what will come out of this process and this conversation. We can't predict where the Spirit's going to lead us.